Chew a single clove right now, and within 60 seconds, your tongue will go completely numb for 15 minutes. It feels powerful, almost like medicine working instantly. But what actually happens inside your body if you keep doing this for 7 days straight? The answer surprised even pharmacologists. More than 80% of a swallowed dose is out of you again inside 6 hours. Eugenol, the compound doing all of this, and roughly 15% of a dried bud by weight, has never been found intact in human blood after an ordinary dose by mouth. Not low, not detectable. The numbness is real. It's the 7 days that need explaining. Before that, if the kitchen remedies are the thing you keep hearing repeated with total confidence, this channel keeps taking them apart the same way. What got measured in actual people, and what only ever happened in a dish? Subscribe and the next one reaches you. Start where it starts, which is about 10 seconds in and entirely in your mouth. Eugenol switches on the same nerve endings that answer to chili heat and to genuinely hot food. That's the warmth. Then it shuts down the sodium channels a nerve needs in order to fire at all, and that's the numbness. Clinical local anesthetics use those same 2 steps in that same order. That spreading numbness isn't the clove treating your tooth. It's one nerve being turned on and then blocked. That part comes from rodent nerve preparations, so hold it as mechanism rather than as anything measured in a person. What was measured in people is stranger. A sensory panel published in the journal Pain in 2013 tested eugenol on half a tongue at a time, with subjects choosing which side felt what. Repeated application dulled the response each time. Ordinary warmth felt warmer, brief heat felt hotter, and light touch on the tongue became harder to detect at all. Read that last one twice, because your tongue is the thing that tracks what's in your mouth and decides where it goes next. Small panel, single sitting, not 7 days of it. It still points somewhere. Then you swallow, and the whole picture changes. Between the gut wall and the liver, first-pass metabolism takes eugenol apart before it ever reaches your general circulation, and here it's close to total. Work published in Xenobiotica in 1990 followed where it went. Under 0.1% of the dose came back out in urine as intact eugenol. Everything else arrived as conjugates and 9 other metabolites. Most of it was gone within 6 hours, which means there's no reservoir, nothing loads. Nothing builds through the week. Day 4 is day 1 again, and so is day 7. You can mark the calendar if you like, but the pharmacology isn't marking anything. The 7-day version of this has already been run as a trial, incidentally, which almost never comes up when the 7 days get discussed. In 1996, in Human and Experimental Toxicology, 10 healthy non-smoking men took 150 milligrams of isolated eugenol daily for a week against placebo. Clinical biochemistry didn't shift. The researchers found no evidence of the DNA protective effect they were looking for. One thing did move. A detoxification enzyme in plasma dropped, and the authors said plainly they couldn't tell whether that meant eugenol was inhibiting the enzyme or there was simply less background liver damage to produce it. 10 young men, 1 dose level, isolated eugenol rather than buds, and the single interesting result was one nobody could interpret. That's the study matching the title's exact question, and it's a null. There is a better trial on clove, and it deserves going through properly rather than in one line, because it sits underneath almost every clove and blood sugar claim you will ever hear. 70 adults, all of them with metabolic syndrome, raised blood sugar, raised triglycerides, the cluster that tends to travel together after middle age. Randomized, double-blinded. They took a standardized clove bud polyphenol extract, 250 milligrams a day for 84 days. Published in the Journal of Functional Foods in 2022. The results all went the same direction, which is unusual enough by itself. Fasting glucose improved, so did glucose after meals, which is the harder one to shift. HbA1c came down, and that's a 3-month average, a slow number that doesn't move on a good week. Insulin came down, and insulin resistance improved alongside it. On the lipid side, total cholesterol fell, triglycerides fell, LDL fell, HDL rose. And plasma glutathione, the body's main internal antioxidant, went up around sixfold. If somebody has told you cloves help blood sugar, that is the study they're standing on, whether they know it or not, the part of it nobody quotes is what it was measured against. The comparison arm wasn't a sugar pill. It was synthetic glutathione, given as an active control, and on glucose and lipid handling, that comparator produced nothing significant at all, which cuts in two directions at once. It makes the clove result look stronger because it beats something rather than beating nothing. It also means nobody in that trial was on a true placebo, so the plain placebo comparison the rest of medicine runs on isn't there to check it against. The authors were tied to the extract, which is worth you knowing and doesn't erase the numbers. 12 weeks of a concentrated laboratory extract is also not 2 buds for 7 days. 12 times the duration and a different substance arriving in a different form. There is at least a plausible mechanism sitting underneath it, and it's a gut-level one. 2 enzymes in your digestive tract, alpha amylase and alpha glucosidase, break starch down into the sugar that actually crosses into your blood. Slow those 2 down and the rise after a meal is flatter. Clove bud material does inhibit both of them in a test tube. How much depends on what you did to the buds first and not along a straight line. Cooked for 10 minutes, they inhibited those enzymes more strongly than raw buds did. Cooked for 20, less than at 10. The phenolic compounds shifted with it. Chlorogenic acid, quercetin, camphorol, all measurably different across those durations. Enzyme inhibition in a dish is not a blood glucose reading in a person, and none was taken. What it does tell you is that 2 people following the same 2 cloves a day instruction, one chewing and one simmering for 20 minutes, are not consuming the same thing. The glutathione result is worth sitting with, because the research on that one point contradicts itself. Laboratory work on human enzymes runs the other way entirely. Eugenol travels down a minor metabolic route that throws off a reactive byproduct, and glutathione is what neutralizes it, meaning glutathione gets spent handling eugenol rather than built up by it. And once eugenol has been oxidized, it permanently shuts down several enzymes in that same glutathione family, one of them more easily than the rest. So one body of work has clove raising your glutathione 6-fold, and another has eugenol consuming it and disabling the machinery that uses it. Nobody has resolved that. It's also the one thing that moved in the 7-day trial. The enzyme that dropped in those 10 men came from exactly that family, and the researchers couldn't say which explanation it was. Both were on the table in 1996. Both still are. The raw material won't hold still either. The eugenol share of clove bud oil runs from roughly 68 to 82%, depending on the age of the tree and how far along the bud was when it was picked. A 14-point spread in the same spice off the same shelf. The shape of this literature is lopsided in a way that rarely gets said out loud. The benefit side runs almost entirely on concentrates nobody eats, while the documented cases of people eating whole buds are, without exception, cases where something went wrong. That whole bud literature is small, and almost none of it has made it into consumer health content. In 2023, respirology case reports described 4 patients with a clove impacted in the airway. Every one of them had been taking cloves deliberately as a remedy. Everyone came in with a chronic cough. Retrieval took biopsy forceps, a cryoprobe, in one case a balloon catheter. None of them remembered choking on anything. A separate case report from 2022 follows one man in more detail. 72 years old, a non-smoker, no other medical problems. 6 months of cough with a little mucus. He was given oral steroids, which helped partly, and then the cough came back worse. His high-resolution CT scan was read as normal. 6 months in, a flexible bronchoscopy found a clove stalk sitting in the bronchus of his right lower lobe. It was removed and the symptoms resolved. 4 patients and 1 man. That establishes the event happens. It says nothing about how often, and anyone telling you it's common is going past the evidence. But set it beside the tongue panel. A compound that measurably reduces your tongue's detection of light touch. a small dry object taken by mouth every morning, and an age at which swallow coordination is already less reliable than it was. The published risk factors here are specific: previous stroke, neuromuscular conditions affecting the swallow, poor dentition, sedative use. If you take something at night for sleep or for muscle spasm, if you've had a stroke, if your teeth are loose or missing, you're in the group those reports describe. And if you already have a cough nobody has explained yet, adding a daily bud to it makes the diagnostic picture worse. Both published Clove airway reports presented as exactly that, an unexplained chronic cough. The longer clock is different again, and it runs in years. Eugenol is a sensitizer, which is a slower thing than an irritant. Your immune system learns it over repeated exposures, so a person can use eugenol-containing products for years without trouble and then react. Prior uneventful use isn't reassurance, it's how the process works. Once it happens, it shows up as allergic inflammation of the mouth lining and lesions that look like lichen planus, which is awkward because it can both mimic and aggravate conditions you might already have. One documented case: a woman developed painful lesions on her upper gum over the course of a year after a new dental bridge was fitted. The hardened cement patch tested negative. Eugenol on its own came back positive at 72 hours. Zinc oxide eugenol cements are still in ordinary use. If you have a temporary crown, a recently cemented bridge, or a denture liner, you're already getting eugenol daily from the dental work, and a chewed bud stacks on top of it. Cross-reaction with fragrance ingredients and with balsam of Peru is described too, so a known perfume allergy is relevant here. If you take more than one prescription, this next part is the one actually worth raising with somebody. Put directly onto human liver tissue, eugenol suppresses 4 of the main drug processing enzymes, the ones handling a great many beta blockers, antidepressants, opioid painkillers, statins, and calcium channel blockers. Between them, that's most of a typical medicine cabinet after 65. Now the limits, and they're large. That was enzymes in a dish at set concentrations. It does not show that eating cloves produces those concentrations in a person, and given that free eugenol can't be found in blood at all, the whole body version of that interaction is unproven. The gut wall is the more plausible place for anything to happen, since it meets the compound before the liver strips it. A real signal at a real mechanism, and not a demonstrated clinical problem. For someone on several daily medicines, that's a question for the pharmacist, not a judgment call at the kitchen counter. One last pattern, and it's the one I'd want a person to hear before starting. Public forums are full of people describing an escalation. They start at 2 or 3 buds, like the numbness, and drift upward over weeks, 10, 20, and in a number of accounts 30 to 60 a day, kept in the car and the desk drawer so they're never out of reach. The language people reach for is the language of a habit they can't put down. That's anecdote, and it proves nothing about what clove does. It also lines up exactly with what the receptor science predicts, because repeated stimulation of that heat receptor produces less response each time, and the obvious answer to less feeling is more cloves. All of this is education about what's been measured and what hasn't, and whether a daily clove belongs in your particular morning is a call for you and whoever writes your prescriptions. As for where the evidence stands, a systematic review of clove published this year in Letters in Functional Foods went through the pharmacology and concluded that toxicity data remain underreported, that gaps in the clinical evidence persist, and that standardized research protocols and human trials are needed before clove is worked into medical practice at all. That review came out this year. After reading all of it,